Welcome to our LinkedIn special today. We're going to talk about law and studying law in India in particular. We have a fantastic guest with us, Yuganshi Singh. Yuganshi, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll take it from there.
Hi, my name is Yuganshi. I used to work as a writing mentor at Edbrand for a couple of years, and now I am doing my LLB degree at Delhi University. And yeah, I did my undergrad at Ashoka, studied literature before this.
In a previous conversation, we were talking about how studying law indirectly at Ashoka through the lens of different literature over a period of time or genres inspired you to take up law. Did you see that connection when you joined law school?
So, like we spoke about that approach, that analytical approach, and that way of thinking that literature molded, I definitely saw that transferring. Maybe not so much anything else, because the way when you study law at law school is very, very different. It's a lot more focused, a lot more specific. Um, Not to say that there isn't scope for analysis, but it becomes a lot more focused in that sense.
So what is a typical law curriculum at Delhi Law Fac or other law schools you might have heard of in India? How does it work?
So I think in India, like the Bar Council has these certain modules that every law school has to teach. Like it's mandatory for you to do certain subjects or certain courses within your LLB degree. So I think those are pretty much common at a lot of law schools in India. And then on top of that, you have the option of kind of picking your interest in that sense and taking all these optional courses that could be more like commercial law centric. It could be towards international law, human rights law. So that kind of comes in from your second year onwards. The first year, you're pretty much doing all those mandatory courses.
Also, the fact that you had an undergrad degree, a 4-year undergrad degree at Ashoka, and with a capstone and thesis also done in your 4th year, you came in maybe a lot more mature than someone who's going into a NLU or a NALSAR or NUJS. So how do you compare studying law after doing an undergrad degree versus going into law school that is an option in India with these national schools?
So I know the 5-year law degree, that like joint program, is super, super popular in India, but I actually really enjoyed the fact that I had an undergrad that was in many ways very unrelated to this law degree now. I think because of especially the liberal arts setup at Ashoka, I think it kind of opened my mind up a lot more. Sorry, and kind of gave me a lot of time and space to like be able to learn how to question things or be able to learn how to analyze things, I suppose, before I came into this degree. So I actually really value that experience of having done an undergrad first. I think it also gives you a lot of like choice. It's not like I'm doing one thing straight out of high school and that's what I have to imagine my career in after that.
So is there a particular focus? I know because in your literature degree and your thesis at college, you were looking at it from a gender lens. Is there something that you'd wish to continue? How did you then start exploring, and what are you thinking of in terms of specializing in the future, continuing as a lawyer as you sort of progress and get your degree?
So I think I would want to work in kind of international law or human rights law. I think that's there's a lot of kind of scope to improve systems and processes there at the national and at the international level, especially when it comes to human rights law. So that's where I see my interest going in. And also, like your question about law and literature, I think earlier on, I think when I was doing literature earlier on, it was a lot of like, how can we question things? And one of the differences now is like, what are the potential solutions? So it's kind of like the second part of that for me. So I think those are the spaces that I'm interested in and that I came into this degree being interested in. But I think as we kind of go along, there are definitely other areas of interest that are opening up as well. So I'm not super sure right now, but I'm very
Sure.
open to kind of exploring different spaces as
If
well.
you look at human rights law, are there interesting internships or other internships that you might have pursued, may or may not be related to this, that gave you a broader sense of how and when you could sort of pursue those paths in the future, the kind of jobs that you could do, perhaps?
So there are definitely a lot of very interesting internships in the space. You can do them at kind of the governmental bodies that work with human rights. You can do them with NGOs and so on and so forth. And I think some firms that focus on those issues as well. The internship that I'm doing presently at the National Green Tribunal, it's somewhat related. Of course, the focus there is environmental law and environmental matters. But what I've realized is that human rights or just like human welfare is at the center of a lot of those issues and conversations as well. So, in that sense, it's been a learning for me to kind of understand how that definition or that space of like rights and welfare can be expanded to include a lot of other things as well.
That sounds so fascinating because I think rights and welfare of not just the human species, when it comes to the environment, there's the whole larger sort of ecosystem of life forms all around us. And I
Yeah.
think that interdependence, interconnection between humans and what we have is what we consider maybe lesser known life forms are something that need to be addressed as well. So, what are the interesting projects that you would say NGT works on where future lawyers could contribute?
So I think, I mean, in terms of projects, I'm not sure. It's mostly like a kind of redressal mechanism. It's a space where you can kind of go um, to kind of have your rights enforced and so on and so forth. But I think they have a pretty they have a pretty broad ambit of things that they look at. And again, that for me has been really interesting because it's not looking at environment in a strict sense or like the rights or welfare, like we said, of one specific community or one specific like species or whatever. I think what they do is particularly interesting because it's a huge balancing act between the interests and the rights of a lot of different players, including the environment, which I guess like it's not really something that you can bring to court and represent in that sense, but they have taken it upon themselves as a body as they are supposed to kind of speak for the interests and the rights of the larger environment as well. That's something I find really interesting, and it's also something that can be particularly challenging because there's a huge overlap between science and law there. So I think when you talk about the opportunities for lawyers coming in, I think looking at that intersection of science and law to be better equipped to kind of not only have advantageous outcomes for like your clients or for certain individuals, but for the broader environment as well. I think there's a lot of scope and challenges for people there.
Okay, moving forward, talking about say careers and jobs post law degrees, especially say in human rights law or environmental law. Um, of course, big corporate houses, there's the whole push for ESG and things like that, sustainability, and all other factors included. How do you as a person who doesn't seem like walking that path of a corporate lawyer, uh, plan to sort of look at all your options today and say, okay, this could be what I'm interested in?
So, I mean, when it comes to corporate houses, this might be a little idealistic, but I think there's a lot of scope for reform there as well to make it a lot more inclusive. So I wouldn't rule that out completely. But I think for me, after my LLB, because it is again a general kind of qualifying degree to allow you to practice, I would definitely want to specialize in something like through an LLM, through a master's after this, before I kind of jump into like a law career. Because I think that will give me a lot more like specialized tools to kind of go into a specific sector of the law. And I think there's a lot to explore as well, even after an LLB, because here it's kind of like a little bit of everything. You're not really diving deep into something, which is something that I would like to do. So that's one thing. And I think my kind of, again, ideal would be to kind of work at a place that brings in different actors and allows for that kind of collaborative solution finding, maybe like an international organization that works on some of these issues.
Thank you, Ganshi. It's been such a joy just catching up and knowing about your journey, and wishing you all the best in the future.
Thank you. Thank you.